Well, the Charter of 1652, Charter of Oistins, is also known as, is significant because it established firmly and very early on in Barbados' settlement and Barbados' establishment as a colony, the relationship between Britain and Barbados. Up until that point in time, Barbados, after its settlement in 1627, had already been a pretty self-managing, well-run colony. At that point in time, Barbados had already been pretty prosperous as a society, but the colonists then felt the need to ensure, going into the 1640s and with the start of the English Civil War, to maintain the status quo. So when hostilities broke up between Parliament and the British Crown, and that will be the subject of another discussion as to why that happened, the colonists who lived here decided we will remain neutral. So there was no talk about Cavaliers, that would be the supporters of the British Crown, or the Roundheads, those were the supporters of the British Parliament. Because they decided, well, we can't have, even though the political differences, we don't want to have political divisions. We have a colony to run, we are about free trade, we are about religious liberties and freedoms. We want to live good down here, so therefore we are not in any way going to get involved with whatever is happening in the British Isle. But in 1649, that all changed when Charles I was beheaded. Now I should say here that leading up until this point, there had been a number of royalists, supporters of the British monarchy, who had come to Barbados and had, quote unquote, set up shop here. They were very wealthy persons who came here and established themselves here. They created plantations, and they came in such large numbers that it eventually formed the majority of the white population, and especially the majority of the political class. And that was very significant because then when the hostilities broke out and neutrality was declared, unofficially, but it was there, and then with the beheading in 1649, that made a big difference in terms of the approach to what was happening in the UK. Because by the 1649, with the beheading of Charles I, it meant that the Parliament had taken over the governance of the UK. So the locals made a proclamation that we are swearing allegiance to Charles I's heir, which is Charles II. Of course, news of this got back to the British Parliament, the Roundheads, and they decided, oh no, those persons down there who are doing these things, who are making these proclamations, are traitors. So we have to impose some level of control on them, which would have meant things like imposing restrictions on trading between the colonists and their traditional trading partners, which was the Dutch. Those were the persons who would have brought sugar to the West Indies and to Barbados. They would have also sought to then decide we're going to seize properties of those royalists who left property in the UK. They would have seized control of that as well. And they also then eventually sent a convoy, or should I say, a number of ships to the Caribbean under the control of Sir George Askew, who was supposed to take control of the colony. Now, by that time, a new governor had been in place. That's Lord Willoughby, who was once a supporter of the parliamentarians, but then switched over, became a royalist, and he was responsible for fortifying the colony in such a substantial way that by the time Sir George Askew got here, he found a lot of resistance, and he found that it was really difficult to really take charge of the colony. He did make a landing at Speightstown. That was in October of 1650, and he was successful in terms of getting on shore. They fought a battle, they killed 100 men, but he withdrew back onto the sea and became more involved with some skirmishes with the local forces, which kind of ended pretty much in a stalemate. Although the real purpose of his being here was to blockade the country, blockade the colony. But there was a fierce resistance from the local colonists because, again, they believe, and these are the royalists that we're talking about here, they believe that they must remain free to be able to run their own affairs. And I should also say here, by the way, that they were very vindictive, for want of a better word, with the Roundheads who were here, because we did have supporters of the parliamentarians here, and they kicked out 122 of them who then had to flee to other parts of the world. And they were responsible for petitioning the British government to send troops to Barbados in order to take control of the colony. So at this point, because it was a stalemated situation, as you can see, there was some negotiation between Sir George Askew and the local assembly and members of the local assembly with how best to go forward. So they met at the Mermaid Tavern in Oistins, the location which is unknown to us today, the precise location, and they signed these 20+ principles, among which were principles guiding free trade, the establishment or the underscoring of religious freedom, as well as Barbados is taking full autonomy of its internal affairs. They did not seek to really distance themselves from the British Crown. In fact, they continue to swear allegiance and loyalty to the British Crown, but we just wanted to take more control of our local affairs and to ensure that was the case going forward. So the principles outlined in the Charter remain the case well into the 20th century down to our independence. Now, I should have said here, by the way, that the population that we were talking about who did these things were the white enslavers, but then with 1966, then the black masses took charge of our destiny and our control. And that is what happened. We came through emancipation, we came through adult suffrage, we came through the 1937 riots, and then we reached 1966 to take some fuller autonomy over our affairs. So, but we didn't do it fully. It was kind of qualified. That might be controversial to say, in the sense that we retained the British monarch as our head of state. So of course, if anybody really thought of that logically, recognized that that's kind of an anachronism. So we kind of had to fix that, and that's exactly what we did in 2021 with the assumption of Republican status. And going forward, I think it means it should resonate with Barbadian people to understand that we would have come from a stage or a state where we were really under the full responsibility of the Crown to some degree, but then we kind of evolved over time to this state now where we take full sovereignty of our affairs and our local affairs, and now we've come full circle as a people. And that especially with regards to the masses of people, the black population, who have taken charge of this space to which we were brought many, many, many years ago. So to me, the real significance or the real importance of becoming a republic means that we are a fully sovereign nation. And in a times when so many things are changing, where we want to really be in a position to make sure we can encompass and embrace everybody in the society. We want to support diversity. We want to do all of these things and be fully represented on the world stage as a fully sovereign nation. I think it's really important going forward that we recognize that this is a meaningful thing. Becoming a republic really is the natural end point of this process that would have started so many years ago. Certainly for me, a lot of it really started again for the black population with emancipation. We really started to become a part of the conversation with emancipation. Then we would have gone through all of the turmoil of the early 20th century. We would have went to independence, and now we would have reached full Republican status where we have a local head of state, a head of state that looks like most of us as the head of state as well as the head of government. And this is really something that I think we all really need to be supportive of and to celebrate. So in order to do all of that, we do need a new constitution, and it means that we will have to have a constitution that really speaks to the issues of today, that is relevant to today and relevant to who we are and how we see ourselves today. Certainly what we would have had in 1966 might have been somewhat okay back then, but of course we know that there's a more complex society. As a more progressive, hopefully, society, we will need to have a constitution that reflects that going forward. So definitely having a new constitution is an important part of that process.